maybe it just works out much better than, that there's mysteriously strong export strength or something. But no, I mean, what the various European rescues have done is they've bought Greece time. So nothing happens today or tomorrow, or next year unless there's a banking panic. But I don't see how time solves the problem.
Okay, before we move on to another type of questions, let me finish on this point for a second. So, monetary policy helped us a lot in the first stage of the crisis. It certainly, half a trillion dollars now, plus another half a trillion monetary expansion over the next 6 months will help, but that doesn't look like the solution. Climate policy doesn't seem to be in fashion very much anymore. Now let me ask the real question. Why couldn't we have a movement of economists led by Paul Krugman saying that we see no reason why a coordinated fiscal expansion throughout the world could be implemented and could possibly be the best way to drag the world out of this?
Well, this is where we have the problem that not only is there a lack of unanimity among economists, there's a significant fraction of the profession that will oppose anything I propose. Whatever I say, they will propose the opposite. What can we say? So no, if you're willing to take, if you're willing to, if you believe that getting me and Joseph Stiglitz and a few other people together in a room would be able to persuade the world, that would be great. But in fact, we've actually gotten me and Joe Stiglitz and a few other people in a room with President Obama, and we couldn't even persuade him. So I think we're not doing too well here.
Are you turning Republican now? What's happening? Yeah, well, but I'm not convinced, because this monetary expansion story is really how shall I put it? Wrong at the very foundation, isn't it? I mean, you keep pumping liquidity into the system. Call it quantitative easing, call it qualitative easing, call it whatever you want. It's the old image of the horse being led to the water, but you can't force him to drink, right?
Well,
Isn't that so?
There's a little bit. I mean, part of the point is actually it's a little hard to draw the distinction between monetary and fiscal policy at this point. The only reason you can get any traction here is because you are in effect taking on risks. You're taking maturity risk off the hands of the private sector and putting it on the public sector. So that is a kind of a fiscal expansion, but it's administratively done by the central bank, and it should matter a little bit. But yeah, if I go back to when we had at Princeton in 10 years ago, we had a little group of economists who were all worried about the Japan problem. So it was me, it was Mike Woodford, if you're do macro, and Lars Svensson, who's back at the Riksbank, arguing with his colleagues, and Ben Bernanke. And there was a little bit of a division between the Bernanke view, which was that quantitative easing, as we now call it, could do the job, and the view of myself and Svensson that you really needed to change inflation expectations. And we now get a real-world test of how effective quantitative easing can be, but I am skeptical that it can be enough. I think you try it because at this point you try everything, but I don't have high hopes.
Let's get into the dreaming part now.
Okay.
Forecasting the impossible. What is your feeling about the international division of labor in the longer run? Basically, the questions here ask, in different ways. They ask, look, we saw America deindustrializing. We saw manufacturing capacity moving to lower income countries. This has generated it has generated higher income growth in those countries, and we are all very happy about that. And then we are observing this strange situation in a three-country model, U.S., Europe, and China. Let's call it China, in which one country does research and development, one country does manufacturing, and the third country is not clear what he should do. So.
I think that's actually. I think this is provided we can get through the macroeconomic crisis, this is something of a self-correcting problem. You know, in 2007, before everything fell apart, we were seeing, I think, a trend towards restoration of a reasonable equilibrium there. At that point, the dollar was fairly weak. You were actually seeing a sharp revival of U.S. manufacturing trade, and U.S. manufacturing production was on its way up. We actually had some serious labor shortages in America at that point, which were for things like machinists and pipe fitters, because manufacturing was doing very well. And if we can get through all of this, then I think a reasonable value for the dollar, coupled with rising wages in emerging nations. I mean, China is facing substantial upward wage pressure. It starts from a very low level, but I think we can actually see that this would all work. If there's an Achilles heel to the prospects for a generally reasonable world economy, it's actually resources. I mean, in the end, I don't think there's going to be a problem that the U.S. will do nothing. We will always have comparative advantage in some things, but what is an issue is that we're on our way to having the first world population rise from 800 million to 3 billion, because we bring in large parts of Asia, and at that point you've got 3 billion people competing for limited supplies of oil and copper and so on. But you know, I think we can handle that. I think it was self-correcting. I think it will be self-correcting if we ever get through the macro mess. And there's a lot more manufacturing in the United States than people realize. There's a lot more. You know, there's stuff we can do, and and Europe is never understood. Germany remains a mystery, how they manage to actually continue to export with labor that expensive, but they do. And so, and Italy, we were having this discussion in a previous meeting about Italy, and I said that, you know, if I looked at the numbers, I would have a really, really dire view of Italy. But the problem is that would have been true any time in the past 40 years, and still you are here. So,
well, possibly we're here, not as rich as we were.
Oh well.
Huh?
Well, I think, yeah.
Let me move on to another important question, which has to do with the exchange rate. Of course, the exchange rate, say dollar renminbi, but also the exchange rate system. Because the second part of this question asks about what do you feel about the dollar being, in the longer run, the reserve currency, the first most important. So two questions.
Yeah, so renminbi, what China is doing is very bad. Undervalued exchange rate at a time of world and liquidity trap is a predatory policy. And what makes it really bad is the Chinese don't need this. The Chinese are actually raising interest rates to head off inflationary pressures. And what they should be doing is allowing the renminbi to appreciate instead. And then the question really is not whether what they're doing is bad, but exactly how do we deal with it. And I don't think there's any chance of getting them to move without at least the credible threat of countervailing duties. So I'm a free trade guy, but there are times when you just have to say, look, you do need some sanctions in the system. And by the way, this is one thing Obama can do. He won't be able to pass stimulus legislation. He won't be able to pass if he wanted to pass legislation saying that the sky is blue, the Republicans would oppose him. But if he wants to impose tariffs on Chinese exports, he'll have 80 senators and 400 representatives voting with him. So this is one thing that we can do. Exchange rate system. I'm sorry. So the question was what?
Dollar as a reserve currency.
Oh gosh. I actually think the dollar's role has gained a while here. I mean, actually, let me give you there are only two credible candidates for reserve currency in today's world. The renminbi it can't because it's not convertible. The yen is just not a big enough base. So we really are talking about dollar versus euro. And the euro has just taken a large hit in its prospects for supplanting or even being co-equal with the dollar, because one of the things you need for reserve currencies, you need a broad, deep pool of assets that people can invest in, and particularly you need a broad, deep government bond market. And the Eurozone looked fine as long as a Eurozone government bond was a Eurozone government bond, as long as it didn't matter which country it was from and it was all the same thing. But now when you have when Bunds and Italian debt and Greek debt are all highly different, you've got effectively a bunch of smaller markets, none of which is comparable to the dollar. So I think actually we've got at the moment, we have no real alternative to a dollar-based standard. That said, does it matter that much? I mean, if you're worried about seigniorage, if you're worried about who holds your stuff, who makes you zero interest rate loans by holding your currency, the actual nominal value of euros in circulation is larger than the value of dollars in circulation. In both cases, you have a lot of currency being held outside the region, mostly for dubious purposes. So basically, Latin American drug smugglers do their business with $100 bills, and Russian gangsters do their business with €100 notes, and we're both doing fine at collecting a lot of seigniorage.
I believe this is going to be the last question, even though there are many more, but it is about 8:30 now. Here somebody is giving you a lecture in free trade by quoting The Economist.
Okay.
I'm quoting The Economist now. This newspaper is not convinced of the effects of tariffs and currency wars. More than one victim will be counted if this happens.
Well,
this is The Economist.
Yeah. So, and am I supposed to be impressed by the authority? I don't know.
I don't know. That depends on you.
I will quote. I will closely quote Paul Samuelson, who had an excellent paper in 1964 called Theoretical Notes on Trade Problems, in which he said, in the face of persistent unemployment, all of the mercantilist falsehoods become temporarily true. This is, yes, free trade is a very important thing, but if you're going to have a world which is unable to provide enough demand to achieve anything like full employment, then a country which pursues a deliberate undervaluation is mercantilism is real. It does real harm. It's no longer the case that they're doing us a favor by sending us goods cheap. And in that situation, it really becomes a political, a strategic question whether you think whether you think there may be unforeseen consequences, to trade action, but the economics for imposing temporary, for imposing countervailing duties on China is perfectly standard, perfectly straightforward. I think people. And maybe these are my last words here. People often think that economics is about slogans, that there are simple phrases, free trade good, and what it is, and economics is about models. It's about a picture of how the world works, and that's a picture that tells you that free trade in most circumstances is good, but there will be times when it doesn't work, when that argument doesn't work. And here we are. We're in a really weird world right now. We're in a liquidity trap world. Is a world in which many of the usual rules do not apply, and this is just one case of those. And we have a problem, which is that not enough people in policy understand that.
The very last question, even though it is 8:30 sharp. How did you decide to study economics?
Oh, gosh.
It is a true question.
Right, but this is in the public domain. I've explained this,
Please do.
So I'll tell you the story. The question is, do you read do you read science fiction? And in particular, do you read old classic science fiction? because Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction author, had a series of novels, the Foundation novels, which is about, in the distant future, how galactic civilization is saved by a group of social scientists, the psychohistorians.